Welcome to Vertical City. I'm your host, Lennon Richardson. During each episode, I interview one of the world's top experts in architecture, urban design, engineering, or ecology so that we can better understand and develop solutions for sustainable living. Thank you for listening, and get ready to join us on another groundbreaking and uplifting episode. Jorge Eduardo Rubies holds professional degrees in both business administration and in law. He is the founder and current president of Preserva São Paulo Association, the only non-governmental historic preservation organization in São Paulo, Brazil. Jorge's organization focuses on protecting endangered historic buildings through public organization and litigation. He also advocates for the creation of a more functional and sustainable urban environment in Brazil and around the world. Jorge, welcome to the Vertical City podcast. If you would, I'd like for you just to give a brief background about your organization, Preserva São Paulo Association. How did it start, and why is it important?
Thank you, Lennon. Preserva São Paulo was founded 10 years ago. It's a grassroots movement composed only by volunteers, and our members are people from all kinds of backgrounds. We have architects, we have urbanists, we have historians, we have just common people that want to do something for our city.
Excellent. So what does Preserva São Paulo Association focus on primarily?
Yes. Our main objective is the historic preservation and to defend the important historic architectural heritage of the city of São Paulo. But since there are very few organizations in São Paulo and in Brazil that deal with urban issues, in practice, we end by dealing with all kinds of urban issues, such as transportation, infrastructure, housing, etc. We are consulted by newspapers and by researchers on all these fields.
Okay. Why do you feel there's so few non-governmental organizations in Brazil? Is there anything that's causing that?
We don't have this culture of NGOs here in Brazil. We have a lot of NGOs, but most of them are dependent on the public sector. And there are really very few independent organizations that depend on the citizens themselves. So our culture of the third sector is not as developed as in the United States or Europe.
I understand. And your organization is self-sufficient. Is that correct? It doesn't take outside donations from any parties.
Yes. That's a fact that we are really very proud of. We are independent. We are very proud of our independence. We don't receive money from the public sector, which is very rare here in Brazil for NGOs. And we only receive donations from our own volunteers and members. It's very difficult to keep an NGO here in Brazil with these preconditions, but we strive to maintain our independence, and we don't want to be dependent on political parties and so on.
Sounds good. We interviewed you a few years ago for the book, Vertical City, A Solution for Sustainable Living. And in this book, you outline several of the problems that São Paulo is facing, which you described as short-sighted development, governmental corruption, and a destruction of cultural heritage. Over the last few years since this interview, I'm wondering how much São Paulo has changed in relationship to these issues.
Yes. Unfortunately, things have been changing for the worse. Corruption is an endemic problem here in Brazil. Right now, we are in the middle of a big economic crisis, partly caused by government corruption, and the problems of our cities, instead of being solved, are becoming worse in the last few years. We are not investing our money in the right things, such as public transport, such as environment, such as social housing, and so on. we are spending public money in things such as football stadiums for the World Cup last year, or stadiums for the Olympics next year in Rio de Janeiro. So things that are not essential for our people and for our development. And our problems are not being solved. The cities are not improving. They are getting, unfortunately, worse and worse.
Okay. You mentioned the World Cup, and I'd like to talk for a moment about that because I imagine that it was quite expensive to prepare for such a large event. Do you feel that the investments that were made were beneficial in any way to the country, and if so, how?
No. At first, people were euphoric about the World Cup. They saw the Cup as an opportunity to improve the cities, to improve public transportation, and to make investments in things that would be better for the people. But we saw the contrary. Money was spent in things that were not essential. Money was just spent in the football stadiums and infrastructure, housing, other issues that are very important for us were forgotten. And now we are with this big football stadiums that are just being used. They were just abandoned after the World Cup, and we have very serious problems of public transportation, of sanitation, environmental problems that were not addressed for the World Cup.
And so what are your feelings towards the upcoming Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro? Do you feel that the country is preparing better, or are you going to face similar problems with this larger event that's coming up?
The problems will be the same. They will be even worse. I go frequently to Rio de Janeiro, and things there are not improving. The city is now a chaos, it's a mess. You can't go from one point to the other without facing huge traffic jams. The subway network is a shame. It's very small for a city the size of Rio de Janeiro. The Olympic Stadium and all the infrastructure for the sports, for the games, is wonderful, but they are completely forgetting all other aspects of urban life in Rio de Janeiro, particularly transportation, which is a very serious problem, not only in Rio, but in São Paulo and in other major cities in Brazil.
Okay. If you were to do things differently, how would you manage the investments for these large events, both the World Cup that already happened and the upcoming Olympic Games?
Yeah. First of all, we now in Brazil we realize that the World Cup and the Olympic Games were a mistake. The Olympic Games in Greece were one of the factors that made Greece bankrupt, and Brazil is now going bankrupt partly because of the lots of billions of dollars that were spent in the Cup and the Olympic Games without any return for the citizens or for the economy or for our infrastructure. So, first of all, we shouldn't do the World Cup or the Olympic Games at all. And all this money that is being invested in unnecessary things should be diverted to all the things that we consider priorities here for great cities in Brazil, such as transportation, public transportation, a good subway network, housing. We have a huge deficit in housing here in Brazil, sanitation for new parks and green areas, which we lack a lot in our big cities, and almost everything that lacks in a modern city, we don't have here in our cities. Our subway network is, as I have already said, is ridiculously small. Public transportation chaos, traffic congestion are an enormous problem, and so all these problems are getting more and more aggravated and we are not solving them. On the contrary, they are getting worse.
That's definitely unfortunate to hear. Our conversation has made me think about the Beijing Olympic Games, and I know that there was some criticism given towards Beijing about the massive investments that they made to prepare for those games, but it seems like China has managed that investment quite well, and in fact it was a way of kind of shining a bright spotlight onto the country and attracting a lot of attention, which has thus helped the country modernize and seek foreign investment. I'm wondering what you might think have been the difference between how Beijing handled the investments and this opportunity of the Olympic Games versus Greece, and what it sounds like you think is going to happen as well in Brazil.
Yes, that's right. There are some cities that hosted the Olympic Games or the World Cup, such as Beijing, such as Barcelona, such as Tokyo, such as Rome, where the Olympics did really improve the quality of life in the cities. But on the other hand, in places like Brazil, in places like Greece, in places like South Africa, the World Cup and the Olympic Games were a total disaster. And that's mainly because of the government. In places where the government is inefficient and corrupt, the Olympic Games and the World Cup just serve to make things more difficult for the citizens and to spend billions of dollars in nothing. In countries where the government works and functions well, the Olympics and the World Cup and the mega events, other mega events, such as the World Expos, they really have this purpose of improving the infrastructure and the quality of life for citizens. That's not the case in places like Brazil or South Africa.
All right, so also during the previous interview that was conducted for Vertical City, you touched on sustainability issues in Sao Paulo, and you mentioned that a lot of the people in Sao Paulo didn't really have a concern or awareness over sustainability issues, and I'm wondering, from a population standpoint, has that begun to change?
Yes, it's beginning to change, particularly among younger people. They are much more well-informed than the previous generations, so younger people are starting to realize that we need to care about the environment. We need to have transportation models based on renewable energies, such as electricity. We need to rely more on bicycles or in subways for transportation. Yes, younger generations care more about the sustainability and about the environment than the older ones. But this is a difficult and slow process. Things will begin to change, not now, but on the long range. Right now, I don't see this newer generation making a huge impact on these issues of sustainability and others, because they just don't have power enough to be represented by politicians. That's in fact, when it's always a case of politics. When we have politicians that serve the people, that are competent, that are well-intentioned, we have government that does what the citizens need and improve the quality of life for the citizens and worries about sustainability and all these issues that are really necessary. When we have politicians that are funded by corporate interests and they don't care about the people or their own electors, and they just do their jobs to please campaign donors. It's always a matter of politics anywhere in the world. Here in Brazil, in Greece, in Spain, in the US, anywhere.
So what are the common factors in determining the politics that are taking place in Sao Paulo? Are there any other organizations, or what are the other driving forces behind the politics in Sao Paulo?
Yes, here in São Paulo we have 3 or 4 big trusts that control politics here in the city through campaign donations. The most powerful of them are real estate speculators and construction business in general. But we also have bus companies. They make a cartel, a trust, and we have garbage collection companies. Garbage collection here in São Paulo is privatized, and these companies have a huge power here in São Paulo because they fund most of campaigns for São Paulo politicians.
How active is the average citizen in politics in São Paulo? Are the citizens active in politics, or
here in São Paulo and in Brazil in general? The citizens are very passive, but this is changing. We have had very big demonstrations in Brazil in this year of just 2 or 3 months ago, with millions of people in the streets, because people are really tired here, not just in São Paulo and Brazil, but I see this phenomenon in Spain, in Greece, in many countries too. People are really tired because they see that their politicians are not working for them. They are working for campaign donors. And in most cases, the interests of these campaign donors are the opposite of what citizens want. So, yes, Brazilians have been quite passive. They are not reclaiming their rights, but this is starting to change, fortunately.
All right, and so are these movements, are they drawing in different aspects of the population, or is this primarily driven by the youth? Who's participating in these demonstrations, specifically in Sao Paulo?
Well, not just the youth, but I would say that most of the demonstrators are from the middle class, because the middle class is the most impacted by this lack of policies. Well, they are seeing that they pay their taxes and get nothing in return. So these demonstrations here in São Paulo and in Brazil, they are mainly middle-class phenomenon. Not just the young people, lots of young people, sure, but mainly from middle class, older people too.
So what do you think it'll take to really create significant change in your city?
Well, I don't know. We are seeing that people are tired. We are seeing lots of demonstrations. We are seeing that politicians are losing their power and they are losing their authority over people. People are just tired. They want change. They want change in São Paulo. They want change in Greece. They want change in Europe. They want change all over the world. People want to be represented by politicians that work for them and who fulfill their needs and who improve quality of life. So I'm seeing this trend, not just in Brazil, but as I have said, all over the world. People are starting to realize they need to be more careful and more conscious when they elect their representatives. And they will start to elect people that really are more aligned with their own interests, the interests of the people.
Okay. I want to go back to the sustainability topic for a moment. And you mentioned that the youth is becoming more interested or concerned about sustainability issues. And I'm curious what it is that's causing them to become more activated or at least take an interest in these subjects.
Yes. A single factor, information. Younger people are more well-informed, mainly because of the internet, mainly because of the social networks. So younger people, it's more easy for them to get information and to get independent information, not biased information. So I think that the younger people, they are more well-informed than the previous generations. And they are realizing that our cities, the way that they are unsustainable, that we need more efficient transportation. We need more green spaces, more parks. We need more subway networks. We need more bicycle lanes. Younger people are just realizing all of that, and they are starting to fight for that too. I think it's a good trend in Brazil and all over the world.
So how is the freedom of access to information in Brazil and freedom of press? Are those? It sounds like from what you're saying that there isn't much of an issue around those concerns, and that if you want the information, it is available.
Yes, there's total freedom of press here in Brazil, but I think that mainstream media they don't have they don't give you all the information that you need. I think that younger people they find more easily all sorts of information through the internet, browsing the internet, or through other media. Older people, they are more dependent on traditional media, and traditional media not always gives you all the signs of the same issue. Okay, so I think that that's the reason why younger people they are getting aware of the situation more easily and more quickly than the older generations.
Okay. And is it mostly just awareness, or has this awareness led to any sort of actions being taken?
Sure. Yes, sure. A lot of new movements are just starting to grow here in São Paulo. We have movements of cyclists that are getting very strong and very well organized. This is a recent phenomenon. 4 or 5 years ago, that didn't exist, okay? And environmental movements and others are getting stronger because of this new influx of young people into them. This is a real new trend here in São Paulo. And I think that many good things will happen because of that.
Okay. So cyclists is one movement. So they're just people who are deciding that they want to cycle, or what does that movement look like?
They want new bicycle lanes, bicycle paths. They want the government to create policies that have an impact on the number of cyclists that benefit cycling here in São Paulo, that stimulate cycling. So there are lots of these movements in the US and in Europe. Here in Brazil, this is a more recent trend, but it's growing very quickly, and these people is very organized, and they have power to press the politicians to make new laws to stimulate the use of bicycles.
Okay. In addition to this specific movement, are you seeing any movements around green spaces or the development of sustainable buildings?
Yes, sure. Not only on younger people in general is getting more aware that we need more green spaces, we need more trees, we need more green buildings here in Sao Paulo. And the marketing is beginning to understand this new trend. There are some new buildings that are being built here in Sao Paulo that are comply with the green ordinance, and they are very environment friendly. This is a new trend. People is also getting aware of this necessity here.
Okay. So in America, it's often said that our cities were intentionally designed to support the automobile industry, and that as a result, the cities were built not to a human scale, but to the scale of an automobile, which makes most of them not easy to walk, and many American cities also have poor public transportation systems. Do you feel that the same thing is or already has happened in Brazil?
Sure, yes. Brazil, in fact, copied this model from the United States. In the 60s and the 70s, our policies, our urban policies, all what the mayors did was to create expressways and to improve the circulation of automobiles in the cities. So this is changing now here in Brazil. Urban policies are more oriented now towards new to bicycles or public transport. We're seeing new VLT lines appearing in some cities here in Brazil. Some new mass transportation in cities too. But we are now experiencing an economic crisis. These changes are quite slow because the governments and the cities don't have enough money to fund these projects. But it's a change. It's really a change here in urban policies in Brazil, from the car to mass transit and to bicycles and to pedestrians. Yes.
Okay. So how walkable is Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro and the other major cities within Brazil? Are they? Can you get around it all on foot?
Well, in fact, there are some areas in São Paulo that are very walkable. Downtown São Paulo has lots of pedestrian streets that are not accessible to cars. This is a policy that started some years ago. Back in the 70s, we have these policies that oriented for cars, but we have a lot of cities that created new pedestrian streets too. So these two models, they kind of were used together back in the 70s and in the 80s. Now the trend is more oriented towards public transportation and pedestrians and cyclists. But as a whole, I would say that some areas in São Paulo are quite walkable. In other areas, sidewalks, for instance, are very badly maintained, are in bad shape, and it's not so pedestrian friendly. But I think that nowadays the politicians and the people, they both think that we really need better spaces for pedestrians.
That's great. As Sao Paulo continues to grow, how is this happening? Is it growing out on the horizontal plane, or have the city limits stayed relatively the same but density is increasing?
Well, fortunately, São Paulo is growing slower in the last years. It used to grow very quickly, São Paulo. In the 70s and 80s, millions of people came to São Paulo every year from other parts of Brazil, and this created a very huge social problem. Now our growth is slower. It's comparable to the big cities in Europe or North America, but we now tend to grow vertically, okay? We are not using more spaces from the outskirts of the cities to create new neighborhoods, and we are now creating new spaces through the building of high-rises in not only in the downtown area but in surrounding neighborhoods.
Excellent. So when there's a need for a new development, how does the city typically address that? How do they determine the location? Are they considering historical preservation at all? What factors are most at play?
In fact, the city considers it mainly as a financial issue. How much revenue they will have for these projects, okay? When a new building, a new shopping center is built, what matters for the mayor, for the city hall, is how much taxes they will pay for the construction, just that. So there is not that much concern about the environment or about historic preservation, and a lot of important buildings are being torn down because of that, unfortunately.
Okay, so it sounds like also then that the buildings might just be being built simply to serve the purpose of providing a space for residents or for retail, but without much consideration for the long-time sustainability or viability of the building. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
But right now, politicians just care about the revenue that new buildings will bring for the city. They are not that much concerned about the green buildings or environmental issues regarding new constructions.
George, I'm curious, what with everything that's taking place in Brazil and in Sao Paulo specifically, what are you most excited about in Sao Paulo and in Brazil at the moment? What's giving you hope for the future?
My greatest hope right now is about younger people that, as I have already said, they are getting much more well-informed and they're much more conscious about our problems, our needs, and they're going to the streets and they are demanding better policies from our authorities. And right now, that's my greatest hope. Younger people are really getting aware of what is needed, and they are starting to fight to achieve that. Okay, and I think that with elections next year, I have a really great hope that this time people will elect politicians that they are really connected with the needs of the people and have a real compromise with a more efficient government and a more honest government here in Brazil.
Excellent. So, as these elections approach, will the citizens be given many options as to who they elect?
I hope so. As I said, we are in the middle of real turmoil here in Brazil. A big economic crisis, a big social crisis, a big political crisis. And politicians are very discredited right now. Old-style politicians, mainstream politicians. I think that we'll see new faces in politics next year, and new people and younger people and people really desire to change things for the better. That's my hope for the next elections, that there will be real change here in Sao Paulo and Brazil.
So with this youth movement that's starting to form, what do you think would be sufficient to really strengthen it? What's needed?
I really don't know. Only time will answer this question. But I'm very optimistic about it. I think that it's getting stronger. People not only from all ages, from all social classes, from all backgrounds, they are starting to realize that we need real change and that we need a real government that really care about people and not just about campaign dollars. And I think that things will improve. People will be more active and they will demand more what they want.
Okay, so if you look into the future, 20 years from now or so, do you have a vision for Sao Paulo? If the world could be any way, how would you see Sao Paulo 20 years from now?
I hope we will see a city with more quality of life, with decent housing for everybody, with a decent healthcare system, with public transportation of quality, with subway lines throughout the city, all over the city, including the poorer neighborhoods. I see a city with green cars, with green buildings, with a lot of trees and green spaces, and where citizens they are very worried about their neighborhood, their streets, their city, and they participate actively in the politics of the city. I think this is the most important issue. People need to get involved in the local affairs, in the affairs of their city, in the affairs of the neighborhoods. They need to be more active. They need to rely more on themselves and not just on the politicians. Okay? This needs to be the greatest change, and not only in Brazil, not only in urban issues, everywhere and in every issue. Everybody must participate in our democracy.
All right. Sounds like a very strong call to action for the citizens of Sao Paulo and for Brazil. For those of us who are external to the country, what would you like to see the world do in support of Brazil?
I think that everybody must take this into account. We must be the cause of our own changes. We can't rely on politicians to change our cities, to change our countries, and to change the world. We must go and to fight for better quality of life, for better transportation, for a better healthcare system, and for a more efficient government, and for better, for a better future for ourselves and for the next generations. We are the main factor of change in the world, each one of us.
So worldwide, from an urban perspective, what things are exciting you, and what are the possibilities that might be able to transfer into Brazil?
Well, I'm quite excited about the development of electric cars. I am seeing throughout the world the development of other forms of public transportation, such as VLTs, such as magnetic trains, and so on.
How can the cities of the world support each other in their growth towards sustainability and a higher quality of life?
Through exchange of information and of technology and of experiences. Many cities in the United States, in Europe, in Latin America, in Asia are doing quite interesting things right now in terms of urban policies. And we should learn with each other. Each city has something to learn from the other, and each city has something to teach to each other.
I've heard that Curitiba is quite a sustainable city, and that it's green, both in the sense that it has many open green spaces and that it has sustainable infrastructure. I wonder, what is it that has allowed Curitiba to set itself apart from the other cities in Brazil?
Curitiba has had competent leaders and competent urbanists such as Jaime Lerner. And Curitiba has innovated and wasn't afraid of innovating and creating new experiences in terms of urban policies. And it did so very successfully without a great amount of money. The population actively supported these policies, and that's because they were so successful. So it's a combination of these two factors: the population support and creative, competent politicians, urbanists, and leaders. And I should remark that in Curitiba, all these projects weren't that much expensive. They were low-cost projects because Curitiba, like other cities in Brazil, doesn't have so much money in their budgets. And all these projects were very efficient and of low cost, and they got a very big benefit from these projects, even with investing not much money in it.
So what are some of the specific projects you're referring to?
The bus lanes, the bus rapid transit, which in fact is a creation from Curitiba, and the green spaces, and the pedestrian spaces, and so many projects created by Jaime Lerner and his team. They were exported to many cities throughout the world, in Brazil and Latin America and in other countries.
Who are some of the leaders that are really driving the sustainability issues in Curitiba?
Mainly Jaime Lerner. He was the creator of most of these programs. He initiated them when he was a young urbanist and later a mayor of the city. And he was the one who did the kickstart for all the implementation of all these projects. He has the most of the credit for it.
Is he still active?
Yes. He's still active. He is now a consultant, and he's collaborating with urban projects in many cities in Brazil and throughout the world. He has this ability to create a team of professionals which is first class. And this was a key factor too in the implementation of these policies.
He was previously the mayor of Curitiba. So is there any chance that he could serve a leadership role in any of the larger cities in Sao Paulo or Rio de Janeiro and implement a lot of the same policies that he previously implemented in Curitiba to help improve these larger cities to become more sustainable and livable?
Don't know, but in fact, he worked as a consultant for the government of São Paulo and other cities in Brazil. And he has brought many good projects for São Paulo. I don't think that any of these projects was implemented here. But anyway, he still works as a consultant, not as a politician or as a government official. And he's working not only in Brazil, but throughout the world.
What's the name of his firm, or does he operate independently?
Yes, I think he operates independently, but I'm not sure.
And how do you say his name again?
Jaime Lerner. There's a chapter on him in the book Vertical City. He was interviewed for a book too.
Oh, okay. I know who you're referring to now. Okay, excellent. All right, well, we've had an excellent discussion thus far. I'm curious if there's anything else you would like to talk about before we say goodbye in regards to sustainability, urbanism, and the future of humanity as a whole.
Yes. I would say that the main thing that I learned during all these years of activism is that people need to be engaged for us to create better cities and better urban spaces. If we don't have an active participation of cities, it's very difficult to create successful urban policies that improve the quality of life of the population as a whole. So I think that's the key ingredient. The population should be involved in all urban policies, in all urban matters, environment, transportation, historic heritage, and so on. Without the active involvement of people, the policies are doomed. That's the main thing that I learned from all these years of experience.
Okay. I think that's definitely a valid point, that the more active the citizens, the better the city is going to be. What are some of the key factors that cause citizens to become activated and to take responsibility for their city?
Well, first of all, the citizens need to be informed. They need to be conscious of their importance. And democracy should be more participative. There should be more instruments in the democratic process for the citizens to participate actively in urban policies and other policies too, healthcare, education, everything. This applies to everything.
Okay, great. Well, this has been a very informative interview. I thank you so much for appearing on our Vertical City podcast. And thank you again.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Lennon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Vertical City. Learn more about the Vertical City concept and continue the conversation by visiting our website, verticalcity.org. I truly hope that you have enjoyed this episode. If you did, please subscribe to our podcast, leave a review on iTunes, and most importantly, share Vertical City with your friends and colleagues so that together we can create solutions for sustainable living. I'm Lennon Richardson, signing off for the Vertical City team. See you next time.